Hello guys, and welcome to another installment of Countering the Meta. I am your host Brandon for this segment. Today we're going to be talking about the big bad dragon himself, Shenron. These are just going to be some pointers to help you going into the matchup, especially sitting across from this leader. Ourselves, we're going to MomoCon here in Atlanta this weekend, so definitely some helpful pointers just to make sure you're ready for the matchup and prepared, especially for siding with it being a best of one pre-side. I'm not sure what the ban list is going to have in store for Shenron. However, if you're looking at possibly winning your locals or taking another event before the ban list comes out, definitely some pointers to look out for. So first, we always like to start off with one. First of the three main points is hand size. So it does have quite a large hand size after the first few turns, with it searching balls every turn on the front side. I do believe it needs 6 to awaken, and they just need 60 energy. So sometimes they can get the 5 balls. If they don't get the 6th one, they can just combo with something to get the Z energy and then be able to awaken, and that gives them a leader swing to draw as well as the untap to draw. So yeah, definitely a lot of hand size and card advantage potential. The thing is though, Sin tends to combo for damage, so it will be losing cards to push double and triple strikes. They're going to be using the deluges, they're going to be using their super combos to push some damage, maybe potentially some cards in hand to actually go ahead and make sure that those 20Ks and the 30Ks go in. The free draws do come from 4-cost Sin, 1-drops, and Nova. So the cards that I show here on the actual slide. So the Sin Shenron Register is going to draw one. Then the Nova Shenron is going to draw one after being minus and being played. Then the Super Natron Shenron and the Oceana Shenron, those are just extra searches and extra draws as well that are going to help facilitate either your Cracked Dragon Balls or grabbing Yek Unison or Shadow Dragons. However, nothing else really draws besides like leader swing on the Z leader and the regular leader, obviously. So otherwise, they are just getting that extra hand advantage in those early turns, and then after that, it's going to be hard to gain more hand size. The thing is, once Sin exhausts his combos for damage, it's harder to gain advantage, right? So after you have that turn where you're sitting close to 12 cards, maybe even more, and they start to combo for damage and use more of their cards, it's just cycling. They're not essentially gaining extra cards like Gogeta per se, where you're going to be plussing 2 almost every turn. Sin is really just going to be a +1 with that leader swing. There's not going to be too much hand advantage after that. Hand control, in turn with that, hand control hurts big time. So being able to make them bottom deck, or pitch cards, anything that's going to be stopping them from actually gaining cards, potentially cards like Topo or the Android 14 for Gamma, that does hurt, as well as some of the other floodgates too. They don't really want to be pitching cards because they want to be able to keep that hand advantage to push that damage to make sure we don't go out too long against other decks. Yeah, Gohan TP doesn't draw cards, neither does Rush Attack plus any negates. Obviously with the token negate, they're taking life. However, with like the Rage Shenron free negate for Z Leader, that is, obviously there's no hand advantage for that. It's just a free negate to play. Any like the Dispo negate that they're playing for the Unison, sometimes with different builds, that doesn't gain any advantage. So really nothing to garner more hand advantage after those initial first few turns. So next we're going to head and move on to the strength / kill potential. So this is the big one, right? Because this is the big bad dragon. So this guy is showing up in every event, a lot of tops. Some of them are winning, others not so much. We have other decks that are creeping up the meta, so I definitely think there's potential to win with just about anything. However, the strength and kill potential on this deck is massive. So the Z leader neg is activate main. The 8-cost Sin is activate battle for the neg, and the 4-cost is an auto to neg. So those are things to look out for, right? So we have the activate main on the leader side, the regular leader, awaken leader, and also the Z awaken leader. So they have an activate main to go ahead and minus something by either 15 on the regular awaken or 20 on the Z awaken. The 4-cost Red Destroyer, that's going to be an auto. So you're going to choose one of your Shadow Dragon cards, and then you're going to minus something by 20k. So it can take care of token negates. It can take care of regular Gohans. It can take care of anything that's 20k or less. It's going to be able to wipe it. The 8 cost, however, though, is an activate battle, so that's going to be more so to watch out for on your turn. You want to be able to clear those, otherwise you can swing with anything without barrier, and it can pretty much neg it to death. And they're going to be definitely minusing it on their turn to hopefully give to definitely give it that +5 to make it a 35k. So those red players, be wary of that, as it doesn't get the first initial neg. It will become a bit stronger. So red strats typically don't work for this leader and this deck as much as it would for other ones. So the dual attackers, double strikers, and large 35k triple strikers, obviously be wary of those. The dual attacker, what I mean are the rush attacks, obviously. We have the Nuova, and then there is the Ice Shenron as well, which gains crit. Those are basic dual attackers. Obviously, we have the double strikers, which are like your Dread Destroyer. You have the Gohan. You have your leader, the Z leader, and we have also any of the Kabas and the one-drop guys that they're playing. I know some lists are playing the Bulma super combo to play out the one-drop Earthling, so you can play out a Gohan for free on your turn, and you can also play out the one-drop like Trunks Take a Life double striker guy. And then obviously we have the large 35k triple strikers. Now the 35k comes from the neg, so sometimes they want to push the extra 5k damage. They'll go ahead and minus it with their leader effect. Otherwise it'll just be a 30. But again, they're going to be comboing on that to make sure to push out that extra damage to put you in those lethal areas. So access to easy rush attacks with the amount of Z energy it generates. So obviously we know that those cracked balls are going to be going straight to their Z energy, as well as any regular combos that they're doing with their deluges, their super combos, any of the shadow dragons that they're comboing from board just to kind of push extra damage. So be careful with those. It will have rush attacks after those initial turns, especially when they run out of cards. Rush attacks are crazy good, and they're going to have a ton of energy and a ton of Z energy to work with. So a lot of negging potential with Sin Shenron cards and Gohan, plus free negates. So obviously be wary of those. If they typically have one open, I would assume it's going to be for the Gohan TP. So be careful with playing anything that's going to just die instantly. Trying to see if you can maybe keep the Gohan on board. That way, I know it's going to be a constant 20k pressure card. However, it makes sure that they can't use it again on your turn. And then the Sin Shenron cards, man, they have a ton to neg. Like I went over before, the Dread Destroyer, the 8 cost, the Z Leader, they all have super neg potential. So just be careful keeping things on board, because pretty much they're going to be wiped out. Plus the free negates too. They do have free negates, so they have the Rage Shenron. They have their token negates. Obviously, some unison builds are playing Wolfang Fist or the Dispo. So be careful of those. Z Leader being a 20k double strike is constant lethal pressure, so be careful if that card hasn't swung yet. Just be careful of it being up. That's a huge swing. They're going to combo something on top of it, obviously, to make it a bit more. So just be aware of those. It has a free 8 cost triple striker with the Sin Z lead, so if you haven't played against this deck, be careful with that. It does have an activated main to remove 6 and play up to one free Red Shadow Dragon card from your hand. It is any Red Shadow Dragon card. However, typically they're going to be playing the 8 cost just because it's another free triple striker, and it doesn't have unique, so you can have as many on board as they want. But to awaken, they must be at 3 life. So to Z awaken, they do have to be at 3. It's not hard for them to do, but typically the strat is to not get them down to 3 and kind of make them take it themselves. Clear board, whittle their hand down to make it easier, and that way whenever they do go in with that Z leader effect, that it's going to be pretty minimal damage. So token negates do get counterplayed easily, and KVIP does minimal damage to Sin's game plan. This is just for those red players out there. For one, I know I play red a lot. KVIP does literally no damage to this, so best to just side it out entirely. And token negates do get counterplayed easily, and also do get negged with that 4 cost. So if you play a token negate, it can get Gohan. If you play it can get minus from the Dread Destroyer or the activate main from the leader. So just be wary of those. And always ETBW, so expect the board wipe. Shout out to my last video in case you guys watched that one. So expect that one too. You're not going to have a lot of stuff on board. Lots of negative clear boards pretty easily. Also, some of them are running the Vegeta secret rare, so that's a tap 4, minus your leader by 5, and then just activate main to wipe the board, and your credit life as well. So your board state is pretty much going to be in a constant ebb and flow and a constant flux state. So just be careful of that, as those typically do not last as long as we might want them to. So moving on to our last point here, we have the crackback, right? So we always have to know how to go in and how to actually push damage against this leader. So after initial 3 to 4 turns, hand size starts to dwindle with Sin. I know in testing, I'm playing Gogeta, just as a spoiler warning to you guys, and my buddies probably are testing a lot of Sin. They might be choosing that for the event itself. So with that, just testing against them after those initial 3 to 4 turns, their hand size starts to dwindle. Asking them how many cards in hand when they're playing the red Shenron, how many cards in hand when they're doing testing, or comboing guys, comboing a deluge to save a guy to make sure that their board is protected. And, after you wipe the board, asking them how many cards in hand is always nice, because Sin, the bigger the hand, the harder it is to going to be able to defend against it. But obviously, when you whittle that hand down, it's just those bigger guys that you have to kind of overcome and make sure that those get taken care of. So again, it does have access to free negates with the Rage, the Token Negate, and the Dispo, depending on the build they're running. The Dispo is going to be for Unison builds only, so if you're seeing one with the Unison, be expecting those. It kind of catches somebody off guard when they Spirit Boost 2 into free negate. So just be careful of those. Obviously, Rage Shenron and testing the ops is going to be an obvious one. And then any of the neg potential with the 8 costs on board. I know sometimes it's hard to clear those guys, but if you have a way to, I'd suggest go ahead and doing it. Just because if you were to swing with something that doesn't have barrier, they do have potential to remove it entirely. So clearing the board is crucial versus Sin, as leaving the 4 cost and 8 drops will hurt next turn for sure. So leaving those on board are going to be detrimental to your game plan unless you have a way of protecting yourself completely through that next turn. Because that's another triple strike that they have to swing with. It's another double striker. They have their leader. They have all the energy open too. Now that stuff was limit 1, but it's not unique. So they can play as many 4 costs and 8 costs as they want on the board. So make sure we're clearing that stuff off. I have a little note here saying don't clear the TP Gohan. That's totally up to you. They can play another one. It does have unique on that one. So I would just make sure you're being wary of that. If you do clear it, they can probably just play another one and mine something by 20k. You probably don't want that, as that kind of goes against your game plan. So you can either leave that on board and deal with the constant 20k pressure, or you can remove it and hope they don't have another one. However, just always be wary of what their energy looks like. Sin 8 drop has an available activate battle on your turn, so be careful swinging without barrier. I've said this before, especially with like the rush attacks if you're red, or just pretty much anything that doesn't clear the board and just sits there and has a big swing and doesn't have barrier, it's going to get negged. So make sure we're taking care of that 8 drop before it actually is able to do the damage, and that we don't have to deal with it next turn as well. Don't swing on battle cards, as to save them they use Trunks Deluge. This isn't like a heavy don't. You can obviously do it to clear boards sometimes. I was doing it with like rush attacks, or as Gogeta, I was swinging on the Nova with the Gogeta, playing the Gohan TP to minus the Dread Destroyer, and then comboing the Gohan on the actual Nova as well. So you can definitely do that to clear them. However, they do have a way of just saving it with the Trunks Deluge, so always be wary about that. It's a free 10k to go ahead and combo to save it for defense. Once board is clear, though, whittle their life and hand size down with pressure. So make them go ahead and combo pieces, or sometimes you can give them crit and things like that. So always be wary about that and looking at their hand. I always like to ask them how many cards in hand, especially with Sin. Gambit's a little different. You can constantly see their hand and know that they're not gaining anything, but Sin is a little harder to tell, just because they are constantly cycling and they do have a big hand on those initial turns. So always be wary of what their hand size and what their life looks like, because they do have certain checkpoints as to when they need to use things, like again 3 life for the Z leader. They're going to be using things to take their life already, or they have the new TP as well that takes a life too. So always be worried about that. So in conclusion, Sin Shenron is a tough matchup, but be prepared for the long game, and they will run out of steam. If you're able to defend, red's a little harder because it doesn't have traditional red defense methods. So like I can't KVIP it, I can't really neg it with anything like that. So I really have to find ways of KOing it and getting rid of it, like warping it. However, blue has board clears. Yellow has ways to go ahead and wipe it to make sure that they don't do anything with it on your turn or their turn. So there are other ways to actually go ahead and get rid of it as well. So always be wary of preparing for the long game. So that way you can defend properly, do your damage when you need it, and kind of drag it out, and then they start to slow down. Make sure to be ready for the 1 life burn. It's happened multiple times to me. If they have the Vegeta, they have it. However, try not to take yourself down to 1 because they are playing those in the list. Some of them are running Radiant Saiyan, some of them are running other ones depending on what, if they're running the red-yellow build or the pure red. So always be worried about that. Vermilion Saiyan is the thing too. So, 2 barrier cards on board might not be the answer, as they could just pay 1 to negate and warp it. So just always kind of be looking and constantly ready for your opponent to do something. However, that 1 life burn is very, very real. Especially with the Nappa ISR too. So sometimes it can burn from 2 to 1 or 1 to 0 depending. If they're not running Vegeta, they're probably going to run Nappa as like a cheeky side option, or maybe even in the main, but I just prepare for Vegeta SCR in general. Like I said before, Sin is infected by Power Neg, so red is a tough matchup. I know for a fact I've tested against multiple times. Sometimes it really is just die roll dependent, but for other decks, they have their own ways of getting rid of the 8-drop and getting over it, so just always be prepared for that. Hand control does hurt Sin, and our local specifically, green deck kind of robs Sin of their hand, and they are able to try to whittle them down and get rid of their big guys later. So hand control does hurt, so try to push when you see their hand size dwindle for sure. Sin is heavy aggro, but if you can defend until later, it becomes much easier. So this goes hand in hand with that hand control. So if you're able to draw them out and make sure their hand becomes smaller and smaller, and you're able to give them the damage in slow increments, and make sure that they can't set up as big as board as they'd like to push with all those swings, because like I said, they have dual attackers, double strikers, triple strikers, single strikers too. So just make sure that you're constantly able to defend and get rid of those. Maybe giving them like a floodgate, like a topo for red, or if you're playing Gamma, hit them with that Android 17 or 14 to make sure that those floodgates go through. So always be sure just to constantly defend, and if you can draw it out, unfortunately it is the way it has to go, because it's really hard to aggro them down themselves. If you're able to do that, great. However, if you're a blue deck or like a longer red deck like Gogeta, I would just try to drag it out and see what you can do. So yeah, so those are the points I can give. Sin is hard to kind of pinpoint, but those are the definite points I've found in testing. Hopefully they work for you as they have for me, kind of. It's still going to be a tough matchup, but with some of these pointers in mind, I definitely think it can become a little bit easier. So until next time, guys, be well, take care. I'll talk to you later.